Namaste. Welcome. We will continue our celestial pilgrimage, this journey in Shambhala. Before starting, let's do a consecration. Please close your eyes. Keep your back straight. Relaxation. We bring the awareness in the middle of the chest, a little to the right. From the depth of our soul, we consecrate to God the spiritual heart, the fruits of this satsang, about Shambhala, which is an archetypal expression of the spiritual heart. Keeping the awareness of the heart. Maintaining a state of aspiration and intense longing for the union with this spiritual realm. We gently open the eyes. So we will continue our journey, remembering to keep this purity of intention. To remember, it's not about you. It's not about you as a person. It's not about you, but it's about becoming transparent, a channel of light, love, and compassion. And during this satsang, we will continue to speak about the subtle geography of Shambhala, the symbolic geography, and then we'll refer a lot to this subtle geography of the heart, of Hrid chakra, which is something quite important, since in Hridaya we didn't speak about this too much, and this is an important aspect which appears in Kashmir Shaivist tradition, in Vajrayana Buddhism as well. So we will clarify all the forces and the energies and different aspects of consciousness related to the heart as a reflection of Shambhala and what Shambhala would represent. And then in the second part of the Satsang, we will have in the beginning a meditation. Actually, I will give you a quote from a beautiful, one of the most beautiful accounts of a message coming from Shambhala. And it starts with a meditation, classical meditation, I would say, a very simple one, which is a part of Kala Chakra tradition. So Shambhala inspired. And then the confession of a revelation. So this is the plan for our satsang tonight. You remember we spoke last time about the geography of Shambhala. We spoke that it is surrounded by those circular high mountains, and then even more higher inside, so two circles of mountains. And then we said that these mountains are separated by valleys and rivers in 8 petals like. So this is an image of the kingdom of Shambhala, and the core of that kingdom is like the core of the lotus. I will continue with a classical description from Kala Chakra, from this Kala Chakra Tantra, from this essential text of Tibetan Buddhism. Each of petals contain 12 principalities ruled by a local prince. Thus, there are 96 princes who are loyal to the king of Shambhala. We will see this has a significance. So each of these 8 petals, 12 such smaller elements there. At the very center of the lotus flower, in the inner ring, lies Kalapa, the capital of Shambhala. To the south of the capital, there is a park of sandalwood trees called Malaya, where a huge 3-dimensional Kala Chakra mandala was built by the first king of Shambhala, Suchandra. This Suchandra apparently had the initiation from Buddha Maitreya and took these teachings in Shambhala. So this the 3-dimensional Kala Chakra was built for the purpose of giving initiations into that teaching. We will speak later on about how this initiation happens, but essentially the disciple to be initiated stands blindfolded outside of the eastern gate, which in our orientation is south, and imagines himself being reborn into the mandala. So you become a baby entering a new world and new life leading to liberation. So this is to the south. Then to the north, the shrines and sacred images are located. Regarding the king's palace, larger than that of Indra, so of gods, is glittering in the middle of the capital, competing in brightness with the sun and the moon. Its roof is made of pure gold, and the ornaments are of precious stones, such as diamonds, pearls, emeralds, and sapphires. Another very interesting mentioning, special crystals are embedded in the floors and ceilings to regulate the temperature of the interior. In the center of the palace is the golden throne of the king, supported by 8 carved lions and decorated with wonderful gems. The king is the holder of the magic wish fulfilling jewel, Chintamani, given to him by the Naga deities. The Naga deities are deities from the underworld, the snakes. Ramana, if you remember, in the first part of his life, Ramana Maharshi stayed in a temple dedicated to these Nagas. You have here other representations of Shambhala and of the people or a life like Shambhala life, kind of being, happiness. And then you see these two here in this representation, and there are other similar representations with these two mandalas, 3-dimensional mandalas, it is said. And if you look, it's like Shambhala yantra, the way in which they represent it. Here it's the same. We have in this part a similar representation. About Chintamani, I mentioned Chintamani. This is, you see this here, a Bodhisattva keeping Chintamani, the jewel, the crest jewel, the most precious jewel, who is considered to fulfill the wishes and to bring spiritual transformation. So it's an agent of transformation, Chintamani. Here it's more clear, this Chintamani, the supreme jewel. It's correspondence with the philosopher's stones, you know, in the alchemical tradition. This is a representation. So the circle, and in it a triangle, and then a square and a circle. Again, it's the very symbol of the philosopher's stone, that wisdom that could transform any emotion back in the spiritual heart, or any metal in gold. It's interesting that, and we will speak about this later, we have in the representation of the heart center, Hrid chakra, this wish-fulfilling tree, which corresponds with Chintamani. Actually, in the description of one of the great lamas, Tibetan masters, who had a vision of Shambhala, who was traveling in Shambhala, and is maybe the most relevant master who spoke about Shambhala. He Kamtrul Rinpoche, he said that the Shambhala king has an inexhaustible treasure vase, a wish-fulfilling cow, an unsown harvest, and a wish-granting tree. This wish-granting tree, Kalpa Vriksha or Kalpa Vriksh, appears often in the Indian tradition as well, and is connected with the Hrid chakra, with the spiritual heart. We will speak more about this, but you see, it's a lot about symbols of abundance, which are related with, in the Indian tantric tradition, with Lakshmi or Kamala, Kamalatmika. And Kamalatmika has also 8 petals. Actually, there are 2 lotuses. The first 8 lotus, 8 petals lotus is basically a frame for almost all yantras, but then Kamalatmika has another one pointing to this essence of the heart there. The king, continues the description, is surrounded by a splendid entourage, always at the ready to perform his pure wish. All the new products for daily samsaric use have been manufactured spontaneously without any effort. All of this has come about by the compassionate prayers of the Buddhas and by the force of good karma of sentient beings, Kamtrul Rinpoche would say. So we find here a lot of symbols, and I'm going to speak about them. It's again that bhavana, that transfiguration Abhinavagupta was speaking about, opening ourselves to this beauty of such a realm. And we will try to see why this is relevant. So what a symbol actually reveals is not so much about our interpretation, the Oriental tradition would say, but about our level of consciousness. So we may see something which may be very meaningful when we are alive, when our heart is open, and then that same image or even a deity or a picture or something may say nothing to us if our heart is closed. So beyond just the theoretical, of course, we can make speculations what a symbol is about and so on, but beyond this theoretical, rational interpretation is this devotional interpretation, and that real meaning of such symbols depend on the level of consciousness, and the deeper or the more profound our level of consciousness will be, the more awakened we will be, the more able to actually see ourselves and the world. We have the lotus, and I mentioned last time briefly, the lotus is a classical symbol, is a support for deities in both Hindu and Buddhist tradition. It's a symbol of purity and enlightenment, even in the midst of delusion and ignorance. So deities, Buddhas, Bodhisattvas are depicted sitting on a lotus or standing on a lotus to show that they remain in such pure, enlightened state that cannot be sullied by the world around them. So a bodhisattva overcomes the darkness of ignorance and emerges into the light of wisdom. Although she continues to live in the world, she remains untouched by its delusions. Exactly as the lotus is maybe growing in the mud, but continues to remain untainted. We have some images of lotus symbolism, again, Kamalatmika, the very expression of grace and abundance, represented sitting on the lotus and having lotuses in her hands. Also, Krishna appears also from a lotus in his divine manifestation. Also, we can find here the three Murti, the three classical gods in the Hindu tradition, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, sitting on lotuses with their consorts, with their lovers. So that's why we can see that lotus is like a bodhisattva. In spite of the difficulties and challenges of the world, a bodhisattva or a person who has this spiritual aspiration manages to maintain herself in that radiance and that purity in spite of the challenges of the world. Exactly as a lotus starting from a seed in the mud is able to raise above all the, so to draw from the lowest parts to nourish itself from the mud, and then going out, that offspring going above the waters, the murky waters, and then shining that light, remaining untainted by all that darkness. You remember also we spoke about the inner meaning of all this. We spoke about the inner symbolism of the three Shambhalas. They are corresponding with levels of initiation in Kala Chakra. Is the outer Shambhala, exists as a kingdom in the external world, and this would correspond with the outer Kala Chakra. Then inner Shambhala lies hidden in the body. This corresponds with the inner Kala Chakra, which focuses, so the outer focuses mostly on geography, astronomy, astrology, cycles, so external kind of sciences. Then the inner Kala Chakra refers to the nadis, chakras, how to pranayama, how to, so yogic practices basically. And then the other, so it's outer, inner, and other. Other is about the cosmic expansion. So we have the outer Shambhala in connection with Kala Chakra Mandala, with all the deities, the transfigured cosmos. So our capacity to embrace the whole cosmos, or to see, to have a vision, a new vision of the world and of ourselves. But in order to have a vision of, or to embrace the whole world, first the transformation inside needs to happen. So that's why even in their practice of Kala Chakra and all the practical aspects, the inner domain of Kala Chakra is emphasized. So how to transform the body and mind and understand these energies, and how consciousness manifests through different energies in our being. So this Shambhala, as the inner kingdom, lies buried like a lotus seed in the depths of our mind and soul, hidden beneath the mud of murky waters of our passions and illusions. So there is Shambhala, is in the depth of our heart. By drawing energies from these very passions, so through transfiguration, through sublimation of the energies, we can open like a flower and reveal the enlightened awareness of the spiritual heart. So we can use the same principle of sublimation, but supported by this realm of Shambhala. We spoke about the beautiful mantra, the omnipresent mantra, the most important mantra in the Tibetan tradition, Om Mani Padme Hum, the Parama Hridaya, the innermost heart of Avalokiteshvara, of Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, which is the condensed form of all Buddhist teachings. It appears, you see, everywhere in Tibet, in Mongolia, the expression of the heart of Avalokiteshvara. We spoke about Avalokiteshvara as well. About Om Mani Padme Hum, the Om, the jewel in the lotus, Mani, jewel, the same as Chintamani, the jewel, the essence. In a more technical way, it represents the method, the altruistic intention to become enlightened, full of compassion and love for the benefit of all sentient beings, while Padme is the lotus, symbolizing wisdom. Just the lotus grows from the mud. So the wisdom to deal in challenging situations, which otherwise will be lost, to deal in a wise way, and then the wisdom would manifest. Therefore, we can say that Om Mani Padme Hum represents the jewel of enlightened mind, bodhicitta. Enlightened mind is, bodhicitta means this quality of a consciousness that acquires both compassion and wisdom. Compassion and wisdom being the most important essential qualities of a human being, which can and should be cultivated basically by blossoming the lotus of the heart, so appearing in the lotus of human consciousness. This can be cultivated and should be cultivated, the wisdom and compassion. So Om Mani Padme Hum, Om, the jewel in the lotus, reminds us to this jewel of the enlightened mind in the lotus of human consciousness. Also, there are many other ways of looking at this lotus, jewel in the lotus. There are all equally valid. The lingam and yoni as a symbol of unification of Shiva and Shakti, of the two essential principles. Also the spirit, Atman, in the lotus of the heart, in Hrid chakra. So jewel, Chintamani, is the spirit, and the lotus is Hrid chakra. And then we have the lotus of the inner Shambhala, which conceals in its center the jewel of the heart, the pure awareness, gleaming with a diamond-like clarity of the deepest awareness, the awareness of absolute reality. So that radiance, sometimes the king of Shambhala is associated with the essential deity of the mandala, of the Shambhala mandala. So it's the core, it's the essence, and it's at the same time this I feeling, this radiance of the self. Also, Om Mani Padme Hum is sometimes symbolized in this way and presented in this way. So the 6 syllables, Om Mani Padme Hum, so 6 syllables, are an expression of the basic attitudes of compassion, and the recitation of them suggests the longing for liberation, nirvana, for the sake of all sentient beings. Before going further, we can find a similarity with the center of Shambhala Yantra, these 6 syllables of the mantra with the 6 dots of Shambhala Yantra. And then all sentient beings, so when Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, when this mantra is evoked, it refers to all beings, including all the realms, so the realms of gods, of asuras, of demons, of hell beings, of human beings, of animals, and pretas, of hungry ghosts. So all the beings, no matter what karma, no matter what level, in heavens or in hells, all of beings in this bhava chakra, in this wheel of becoming, in this relativity of samsara, all should be blessed. So this is the compassion of this bodhisattva attitude. Also, we again remember that our body becomes Shambhala, and or the practice of Shambhala in our heart. So, as Dardo Rinpoche said, the text describes Shambhala in the form of an 8-petal lotus, so that yogis can visualize it as a mandala in their hearts. Now, this mandala in our hearts, as I said already, is this Hrid chakra, is different from Anahata chakra, a secondary chakra that appears in many texts, in Shak Chakra Nirupana and other tantric texts. Speak about this domain, but we can find in Kashmir Shaivis, for example, In Spanda Karika is a text about Spanda, is the second important text in the Shaivist tradition, fundamental root text of the Kashmir Shaivist tradition. Aphorism about Spanda, about the sacred tremor of the heart. And in Sutra 4950 speaks about Puryashtaka, the soul, is said, is bound by the city of 8, consisting of the mind, manas, intellect, buddhi, and ego, ahankara, and the 5 subtle elements of sensory perception, tanmatras. He helplessly suffers worldly experience, which consists of the arising of mental representation born from that city of 8. So its existence pushes him to transmigration. We will explain to end this transmigratory existence. So we'll explain how to end this transmigratory experience or existence. So basically, Spandakarika said, we are limited and all our existence is caused by this Puryashtaka, or city of 8, these 8 factors of limiting, of the discursive consciousness, of limiting consciousness. And we are caught in these mental representations which simply pushes our existence from a life to another. And how to stop this? Sutra 51 explains this. But when he, that means the soul, is firmly established in one place, the spiritual heart, the spanda, that essence, thus controlling the appearance and dissolution of this subtle body, of this all these aspects, the city of 8, all these elements there, he, the soul, accesses the state of universal subject, or Shiva consciousness, or that universal pure reality, that absolute freedom. Thus, he, that means the soul, becomes the lord of the wheel of energies, the lord of this Puryashtaka, the city of 8. Puryashtaka means the city of 8, the lord of all these energies related to mind, ego, and different tendencies. So we are going to elaborate in connection with this, because as we see, we can refer to this external part as, the cosmos. Then we have the gates, and then here inside it's the classical representation of the kingdom of Shambhala. We have these petals, the lotus, which is this city of 8, Puryashtaka. As I said, the lotus is appearing, lotus with 8 petals is appearing almost in all yantras. The yantras of the cosmic wisdoms, Dasha Mahavidyas, for example, and so on. We'll see why is so. So first of all, to clarify this Puryashtaka, what this means. Puryashtaka, Purya, like Pura, like Manipura, the city of the jewel in, the naval area, Pura, city, and Ashta, like Ashtanga Yoga, or 8, the city of 8, and refers to 8 categories or elements of consciousness, which are basically creating, or the factors that are creating what we consider to be our reality. They are the so-called 5 yantras. This terminology, I hope I will not bother you too much with this. It's a terminology in the Oriental tradition we find in yoga, we find in the Kashmir Shaivism, in the Tibetan Buddhism as well. So there are subtle elements of sensory perception. So the subtle energies of hearing, touch, sight, taste, smell. So in connection with the 5 elements, always, those who study the chakras know that there is a connection between the smell and the earth, taste and water. So smell, earth, Muladhara, taste, water, Svatisthana, sight, fire, Manipura, touch, air, Anahata, hearing, ether, Vishuddha chakra. And apart from these 5, the 3 elements of the mind, of the discursive mind, the manas, or the sensorial mind, the mind which brings the sensations, processes the information from the senses, is also related to the memory. And then the intellect, the buddhi, who makes the decisions, that rational part, the intellect part of our mind. And then the ego, ahamkara, who assumes all the experiences. This is mine. I like this, or I don't like that. I want that. It's me who saw this. The mind, manas, for example, compares what, no, the intellect actually compares, the buddhi compares what you see with what you already know. You have the reservoir of the manas, the memory, and the intellect looks there and say, this is a flower, or this is like this. We will not elaborate now too much about this, but this is the classical way in which, for example, yoga would explain the way in which our soul is caught. So these 8 petals or energy channels related to the lotus of the Hrid, of the heart, corresponds to the 8 kind of consciousness through which we experience ourselves and the world. This is very much what the Kala Chakra tradition says. So it's the essence of our being, that light of consciousness manifests, and then is this framework of these 8 elements, this dynamic matrix, we can say, are like filters. And this, the way in which the energy goes through this and activates this, is creating the way in which we are perceiving the world and are perceiving ourselves. So the consciousness of each of these 5 senses, so the energy and the consciousness associated with smell and touch and sight and so on, and then the store consciousness, the memory of past impressions, that is Bimanas, the consciousness of thoughts, buddhi, the intellect, and the ego consciousness. The 8-petal lotus, like regions of Shambhala, symbolize the 8 kind of consciousness and their relationship to that innermost awareness, which is the spiritual heart. Now, in any mandala, in any such spiritual archetypal design, it's always an emanation that starts from the center. So the center is the radiance, is the symbol of the spirit, is the symbol of the spiritual heart, and then from there displays whatever is manifesting or lies latent and concealed there through different areas of the mandala. The same is in Shambhala, with Shambhala, that essence of consciousness starts blossoming in our being. And if we look now, we come to the Hrid chakra. This is a classical representation of Hrid chakra. And here we have that wish-fulfilling tree, which is or that Chintamani, or that jewel of the king of Shambhala, wish-fulfilling tree, in the Hrid chakra, in the classical representation of Hrid chakra. So we speak here about tantric tradition in India. There we spoke about the tradition Kala chakra in Tibet, but well, coming from India as well. But the same wish-fulfilling tree and this throne, the throne of like the king. And then we have 8 petals related to the 8 Mahasiddhis or paranormal powers. We see that there are 8 paranormal powers related to, and we will elaborate about this, but just to clarify more what this city of 8. So on the one hand, we have these limiting filters of the heart. These petals are these limiting aspects, manas, intellect, and so on. And on the other hand, we have these possibilities of paranormal powers which are there. Also, in Vajrayogini practice, which is practice in Vajrayana, Tibetan Buddhism, in general, the Tibetan Buddhist tradition has a different system of chakras. And there, for example, we have the Hrid chakra, the heart chakra, having 8 petals. No? The Manipura chakra, the navel chakra, has 64. In the classical Tantra, which we know, it's 10. No, we have 4 Muladhara, 6 Svatisthana, 10 Manipura, 12 Anahata, 16 Vishuddha, 2 Anya, 1000 Sahasrara. Here we have 64 Manipura, 8 on Hrid chakra, 16 in the Vishuddha, and then 32 in Sahasrara. And here it's interesting to see how the nadis, or how the energy channels are manifesting. So this is a representation in the extreme right. You have the representation of the nadis, of the energies, how the energy channels are going there. But along with these energy channels, there is also consciousness. So the consciousness is moved. It's an awareness, and the mind, and all these aspects are happening. And also in Vajrayogini practice, a lot of focus is on the openness of the heart, and dissolving Vajrayogini in the heart with the aspirant. Now, speaking about this Puryashtaka, that city of 8, about all those tendencies, we can make also a connection with the stages of dissolution, the 8 stages of dissolution in the moment of death, according to the Tibetan Book of Death. There are some external signs what a person who is dying would experience, and then there are some inner signs, or what kind of perceptions, inner perception, are appearing. And this is what is affirmed in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. For example, mirage-like appearance will come to a dead or to a dying person when the earth element will dissolve, and which is related with this tanmatras, the smell. And then, because of this, the perception is like mirage-like. It lacks that stability of the earth. No? But this means what? That tanmatra, that energy, is from Puryashtaka, from the city of 8, from these 8 elements, that is absorbed. Then the next one, the water, is absorbed. Then the fire energy related with these subtle aspects is absorbed. So all the elements of the senses. Then other more subtle experiences related to a more subtle expressions of consciousness will manifest. This white appearance, red increase, the mind of black near attainment, and then the final clear light. But this will correspond with the dissolution of the body, manas, so intellect, the memory and this sensorial mind, and the ego. So When the ego will obscure, when the ego will manifest, will be just black of near attainment. When the red increase will be the domination of the manas. When white appearance is coming, is the domination of buddhi. When mirage-like appearance is the domination of water. You see, so it's an inner sign, which means the dissolution of that element, which makes the next element to be manifested. Well, in the Oriental tradition, it is these subtle elements which are the cause of the physical world. So everything is basically radiating from this matrix of consciousness, from the heart, through these 8 aspects at the human level and at the cosmic level. So it's not that the physical is the cause of the subtle, but is the subtle that is creating more and more the physical. And then in the moment of that, the physical gets absorbed, or the most gross aspects get absorbed, and finally everything is absorbed in the clear light of consciousness. So what remains would be that pure essence. So we see that in this representation, it's not just that there are some elements there, it's what is happening when we die. When we die, according to the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, we don't experience anymore this world, and then there is this chance to enter that pure light, to be free. Why? Because this matrix is not there anymore. Otherwise, we live very much into it. It's just that we are simply like in a prison, and still the key of the prison is inside, Spandakarika says. So we are caught, you remember, because of this, we go from existence to another. But if we focus, if our soul will recognize that very essence and not be attached, we are attached and we exist like in a prison. We identify, it's not even an identification with physicality, is more and or essentially is about living in these projections. Our thoughts, worries about what will happen, and so on. All these are happening because of these filters. So they are forms of consciousness which create our images, our memories, our sense of I. All of them are there, and we have the idea that this is what we are, while in reality it's not. We are different, we are that essence, but it's just this sticky tendency to get caught by this interplay of these 8 tendencies. So the most, if we speak about visualizations, the most significant picture we create is the image of ourselves. So it's about me. We constantly reinforce this image. It's about me, and I am not good enough, or I am like this, or I am like that. All that creates a prison. I recently discussed with somebody who told me, I feel like in a prison when I go in the mind, and there are all these thoughts, all these worries. I'm like caught. And she told me, I know that they are not true, so I can keep this witness, but on the other hand, I don't want not to honor them, because they are also, it's like denying or repressing those kind of tendencies. Well, actually the Oriental tradition says these are actually visualizations or ways in which we create our reality. So we speak inside, we have all kinds of projections. Is this aham vritti, this I feeling, identified with different things. And we create this image about ourselves. More than an idea, this image is a symbol, charged with emotions and rich with all features of how we see ourselves. No? All these aspects, going from our philosophy, for our way of seeing, all these are in this Puriyashtaka, are about or are a creation. Everything is related to the senses, to the perceptions, how we imagine, how we, and then desires, manas, intellect, ego, nothing else, just all this. So all these are creating what we are. We visualize, therefore, our identity with such an intensity that they seem totally real. And thus, we forget about our real nature, and this way of life simply creates this prison. We are not present. We are always in past, in future. We miss that core of our being. So it's like, it seems that we are caught in that, but this 8 can be limiting, obscuring aspects, but in special conditions can become windows. We speak about that knot of the heart, that contraction that is happening, that limitation that brings everything, but we try to see how here, because we mentioned also about the paranormal powers, the freedom that can happen at this level, how this can be turned in a window, not in just a limitation. Otherwise, we simply remain these symbols of ourselves. These symbols, no matter how complicated and elaborated are simple representations, are not what we are. It's true, it's more than an idea, it's charged with a lot of emotions, but it's still a limitation. Whatever our egos do not or cannot represent, such as the deeper level of consciousness, becomes unconscious. So we filter, and we are sometimes opaque to spiritual intuitions or to a wider perspective of existence, simply because it doesn't fit with our representation about ourselves, with what we deeply see and feel about ourselves. So that deep self-identification. We would want to be more spiritual or wise, but we know deeply that we cannot. We are not. We may want to pretend now that we are, but we know that we are not. Well, the Oriental tradition is telling that even that knowledge that we are not, even that conviction, is just a creation. It's a creation of ourselves, which can be destroyed as or transformed, as Spandakarika said, by bringing the attention to the very core of our being. This is one option. Or by creating that transparency of this. So transforming this 8 petals, or these 8 factors of limiting consciousness, in factors of expression of a higher reality. So usually we see through the illusions that envelop us, and we end up trapped in mental pictures that block our view of ourselves and the world around us. So we are so identified with these images that we consider that these are what we really are. But so we should see Puriyashtaka, this city of eight, these elements, these energies of the senses. So how we configure the world, we see the world as a dynamic framework through which we see ourselves and the world. Therefore, it's more than a filter. We can say it's like a filter. You have a filter here, and through that filter, that light of clarity and awareness, of pure awareness, gets stained. And then we come to see different things. This way of perceiving and seeing symbols, or seeing what we name reality, is very much present in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. So they would say, and this is very much inspired by Kalachakra, they would say a river, for a being in a God realm, that would be a nectar, a flow of nectar there. We'll see a flow of nectar. For a human being will be a river of water, and for a hell being will be just a river of pus and blood and pain and so on. So just the filters, Puryashtaka, is what we see, how we see the world, through that clarity, transparency, or not of this. Therefore, it's like we have here this dynamic framework of consciousness. So we can say that it's not so much about changing the content of our thoughts, perceptions. It's not about just thinking about angels or beautiful things, but the frame through which we experience. So that purification, a purification of this Puryashtaka, of all this, the way in which this tool of ours, mind, intellect, we know in general, we hear this, it's about our mind, but here it's even more elaborated, this, it's about memory, intellect, ego, all this can be purified, and then that is through what we experience. So Shambhala expresses, because it's just a reflection of this Puryashtaka, expresses a pure Puryashtaka, and then it becomes a window to see our real nature. So it's a symbolic way of transforming. So in this longing and aspiration, as I said, a way would be just to detach from all this and stay centered in the ultimate reality, negating anything that is just an illusion. Or to learn to see like everything becomes in that perfect, harmonious way, like Shambhala would manifest. So the practice of Shambhala meditation is to see the transparency of this shield. Any meditation actually is helping us, any Hridaya meditation is helping us to purify this shield, this Puryashtaka. So if in a meditation is just about centeredness in the heart, but somehow if we are not yet, we keep the same patterns and the same ways of thinking, the same frameworks, still that is not yet, we cannot say that brings a real transformation. But any meditation, heart meditation, and so Hridaya meditation, and the meditation with Shambhala can create this transparency, this purity. This archetypal, this longing for an archetypal realm is what is basically the practice of the Vajrayana tradition, in this Tibetan Buddhist tradition. We now start seeing why is so. It's not just an imaginary realm somewhere else, but is this inner domain, which is, as I said, made of these forces which create this existence. They absorb in the moment of death, and therefore we are not anymore, or there are chances not to be attached to this existence or another. Whenever another form of existence would appear, forms of this energy consciousness, Puriyashtaka, will start manifest. And in another life, again, all this framework comes and builds up again, the ego and all the stories. So Shambhala becomes a window and a way of expressing our true nature. Therefore, we can say that Shambhala is a pure archetypal expansional mode of consciousness. Why I say so? Because our consciousness expresses itself in different ways, and this is how we live our life. But a life lived in aspiration for others, in compassion, in a sense of brotherhood, sisterhood, that is the very spirit that takes away these veils, helps us to take away such veils. Now, another very interesting idea is related to that. Shambhala is a symbol easier to embrace. When we refer to ourselves and we refer to different tendencies, we are so identified with all these tendencies that it's very hard to disengage from our ego, from our patterns. No? It's very hard to say, I drop this attachment or this addiction for this and that. No? But with Shambhala, it's like we create this adoration and this openness to Shambhala. It's like we create windows to see into our true nature. But because these images are in a way more abstract or more are not so reactive, if it's about ourselves and changing some tendencies, it's like sometimes an egotic resistance, like our existence itself is threatened. But using metaphors like the image of Shambhala, hidden valleys, or these sacred places, or the cave of the heart, and pure lands, like Amitabha, pure land, and so on, are symbols of spiritual places that can echo in the depth of our being, so they still affect us. They still bring that longing. If we would say, drop your addiction and think about your mom, maybe you say no, because she did this and that and that. But if I would say, let's meditate on Shambhala, let's create a connection with in this spirit of beauty and love and compassion of the world, then that, because it's not so sensitive or wounds creating and so on, it's much easier to embrace. That's why I said that Shambhala in this way, it's more easier to embrace symbol, which can be very effective as well, because many of us can resonate, can nourish this longing, can open to that. So we can speak about all these different dimensions of Shambhala, and indeed we have this beautiful land which exists as a physical realm as well. But then, even more important, we have this inner domain, and recognizing this realm of longing and of spiritual aspiration. I hope this is clear. In this way, we turn the 8 petals back into windows. What used to be just, a contraction and a limitation and a blinding way will give us fresh view of the world and of ourselves. As William Blake said in a beautiful way, If the doors of perception were cleansed, everything would appear to man as it is, infinite. So, you see, it's more than just following a legend. It's about opening in the depth of our heart, echoing, allowing those symbols to echo in our heart and nourishing this longing, the aspirations of the bodhisattvas in such a way that this Puryashtaka is not anymore a limitation, but becomes a way of expansion. And Rumi has, maybe you know, this beautiful poem, out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. Yes. It's like this. It's like this. This field, no? This field is. It is said that the sages have, a common world. No? Let's access that common world. And it's physical, and it's essentially it's in our heart. From there, everything else radiates. So that beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is this field. Yes? And let's meet there. This is a way of purifying and freeing ourselves from this Puryashtaka, the city of eight that can block us, this limiting framework. According to Tibetan Buddhism, these 8 kinds of consciousness normally give rise to illusion and ignorance. But as we advance toward enlightenment, they reveal themselves as different manifestations of the enlightenment wisdom or awareness of a Buddha. So I take again and again the same idea and show now in the Tibetan Buddhism how these expressions can limit or can be manifestations of the enlightened wisdom. So yes, living in a pure land or in a paradise or open to these sacred realms is possible when we allow not to be caught. What will limit us? What is the limiting factor? Well, the limiting factor is this Puryashtaka. Technically, is this ego, ahamkara, ego, then manas, buddhi, intellect, mind and intellect, and then this tanmatras or energies of the senses through which everything is all this world is built up. All that we can think, imagine, feel is about. What if that will change? No, the doors of perception will be pure, as William Blake would say. Then a different perception will be there. So we can distinguish in each of these kinds of consciousness various levels of manifestation of the innermost awareness, the spiritual heart. Then they are not just ways of closing or blocking this light of consciousness and limiting through all those filters of suffering. I see the world through suffering or through my pain, but become ways of radiating light. Compassion doesn't mean that we have to suffer in an egotic way. No, compassion is the expression of a higher level of consciousness, is the radiance of the heart. The radiance of the heart is sensitive, can feel suffering, but not in a contracting way. Suffering is received and is embraced, but through that wisdom of compassion. Now, a very interesting aspect is related to Shambhala. About this we will speak definitely much more which etymologically means the body of enjoyment. Is the second, we can say, the astral body of a realized being. We have Nirmanakaya, the physical body of a realized being, Shambhogakaya, the astral body, and Dharmakaya, the causal body of a realized being. Now, all this purification is about accessing a different domain of these astral energies. So when the yogis are meditating on the astral body of a realized being, of a Buddha, they are actually trying to recreate that perfection. Now, there are two forms of this Shambhogakaya, pure and impure. All the Vajrayana tradition is about visualizing. Maybe you heard this, visualizing deities. Deities, you visualize Vajradakini, or you visualize a mandala, a sphere. And so it's very much about such visualizations, which eventually, after you generate them, it's the generation stage, eventually they even become alive. It's like a creation. They are not just imagination. Then they start being like a genuine creation, and then in the end they are absorbed in Dharmakaya and the causal realm, and in the emptiness or the fullness of the heart, of the pure consciousness. So this is the way in which the visualizations will go. But now it's very relevant to see that there are two forms of visualization. There are the impure visualizations. The impure body of Shambhogakaya is named like this because the energies from which it is composed are still impure, in the sense that the mind, consciousness from which it arises, has yet to directly realize emptiness, pure awareness. So I just imagine Kali or Krishna or a deity. I just imagine. I imagine in a beautiful way, but I still filter through this Puryashtaka. I didn't have the direct connection with the heart. But there is another way of doing this, the pure Shambhogakaya, when it's named like this because it arises from the meaning clear light that has directly realized emptiness or pure awareness. So it's a direct radiance of the spiritual heart. When the petals of this city are not anymore tainted, they are tools of this pure consciousness. They are not limiting and they are not controlling. It's not about my ego wanting to do something, but it's radiating from the heart. So in this sense, we realize that freedom. That's why the mandalas and mostly the yantras have 8 petals, suggesting these 8 tendencies or 8 levels of consciousness or manifestations, which can be contraction, when it's a contraction of consciousness, when we are just lost in them, and then it's not anymore that freedom, or it can be an expansion. And the yantra suggests the directions of expansion of consciousness, how to free ourselves from this. And when we will be rooted more and more in that absolute purity of intention, in that, and ultimately in the spiritual heart, in that freedom of being, as in Spandakarika would say, we stay there, we are free from the cycles of samsara, and more than this, we are just being able to create the world in a different way. To create because we see it in a genuine way, not because we imagine it, but genuinely. It's a radiance of that purity and freedom. This would be the creation which these bodhisattvas, this Amitabha created, this Sukhavati, that land of the bodhisattvas, or the Westland paradise of Amitabha. Now, Khentrul Rinpoche says this again, that master who had had connection with Shambhala, mentioned this: Shambhala is not merely a realm where one hopes to be reborn in the future. While this result is still possible, the main focus is on understanding how Shambhala manifests within the stream of our own experience right now in the present moment. So instead of having just our common filters, we act from the seal of Shambhala. We have the Shambhala, the seal of Shambhala. No, a mudra means seal. And it's like the seal of Shambhala on our heart. Is that seal of beauty and compassion and love and of noble qualities on our heart. So right now in the present moment, in a sense, he said, we can say that Shambhala is the result of spiritual practice. So this new vision, this transparency, this transformation of those obscure directions in windows is Shambhala. Therefore, understanding Shambhala is an important method for focusing our intention and invigorating our spiritual development. So understanding Shambhala, what would be? Well, if Shambhala would be just an external aspect, it will make no sense. But this is so important. And this is the conclusion, I can say, with all this Puriyashtaka. No? It's about freeing ourselves by understanding this radiance of Shambhala. So it's not just about, of course, ultimately it's about the revelation of the spiritual heart. But in the tantric tradition is how the world is changed. And this acting, having an acting power, is about, allowing Shambhala to be a seal of our heart, to have the imprint in our heart. And I will end this part with a story from the Zen tradition. I don't know if you know about this. A great philosophical official, Rico, went, so a man in a high position, went to a Zen master, Nansen, a quite strange and weird Zen master, as the Zen masters would be, yes? And he asked to explain this Quan, this old Quan. Quan is like a riddle which cannot be resolved in a rational way. The Quan of the goose and the bottle. If a man puts a gooseling, a little goose, into a bottle, so manage to fit in the bottle when it's a small goose, and then he feeds him until he is full grown, how can the man get the goose out without killing or breaking that bottle, without killing the goose or breaking the bottle? So how to get out the goose from that bottle? And to this, the Zen master Nansen simply looked a little bit to the man, and then he just, Rico, see, the goose is out. So this is very much about Puryashtaka and how we can be just caught and then we are in a prison and that prison is so real. And then a different perspective changes everything. The goose is out of the bottle. So we can start with this. Shambhala is a hidden place somewhere very far away. And then we shift this perspective. Shambhala is everywhere. Shambhala is in our heart. Shambhala is what we are. It starts also, I mean, it happens also here when sometimes people say, well, it's so beautiful here, it's Hridaya bubble, but in the world it's like, it's not Hridaya bubble. No? The heart is not a bubble. The heart is underlying background of everything. So it's just a matter of shifting the perspective. The world of fears and struggle becomes a bubble. No? Then it's like all that is contained in that fears and relative thing is just a bubble. Even though it seems that it's the whole outside world is just a bubble. While the goose which seemed to be in the bubble is free. Is like reversing the space and then that freedom is there. So Shambhala in our heart, Shambhala everywhere, and then the world starts being perceived and shared in a completely different way. That's why also in Hatha Yoga Pradipika, Light upon Hatha Yoga, we rely on this medieval text of Hatha Yoga often. It is said, Tadva's knowledge is the seed, Hatha Yoga is the soil, and detachment from desires is the water. So for a yogi, Tadva, elements, knowledge, this Puryashtaka is about exactly these elements. All these matras or the senses, the energies of the senses, as I said, sight, touch, and so on, manas, buddhi, ahamkara, the mind, the intellect, the ego, are all tadvas, the knowledge of this, the way in which they manifest. And this knowledge, actually, even in Bhagavad Gita was about the knowledge of the tattvas. This Jnana Yoga, which is, Bhagavad Gita speaks about Jnana Yoga, about Bhakti Yoga, and about Karma Yoga. But in Bhagavad Gita, and I don't think no, for sure, I never saw this explanation that Jnana is yoga of knowledge, and we say, well, Krishna speaks about the revelation of the Supreme Self. But Jnana it's about the knowledge of the tattvas, of these elements of nature. And it's referring to this understanding of Puryashtaka, of this limitation. This would be the seed. Hatha Yoga is the soil, and detachment from desires, it's the water, which allows our soul to blossom, this lotus of the heart to blossom. By this tree, Kalpa Vriksha, the wish-fulfilling tree. Again, the wish-fulfilling tree, which exists in the Hrid chakra, by which is the Unmani Avashta. The Avashta is state, and Unmani, no mind. So the mental state without thoughts immediately sprouts forth. So that Unmani is actually beyond mind or beyond the limited consciousness, And how? By knowing about this Puriyashtaka, or freeing ourselves, or transforming it in windows by Hatha Yoga, and by detachment from desires. We have here representation of Hrid Chakra, you see, and with the paranormal powers around. Another representation with a wish-fulfilling tree there in the middle. Again, the Hrid Chakra, the void of the heart, which is named Niralamba Prakasha, or Niralamba Pradesha, sorry, the place without support. That means that ultimately Niralamba is without support, the void of the heart. That is the center. That is the ultimate consciousness. But then, instead of having Puriyashtaka, that limiting 8, we have the paranormal powers. Which are these paranormal powers? Mahasiddhis, Ashtasiddhis. Ashta means 8 paranormal powers, the great 8 paranormal powers. There are another minor siddhis. Siddhis mean paranormal power. And the Siddha is a realized being who has paranormal powers. So a Siddha, I mean, in the Advaita Vedanta, there is this tendency to consider that yogi would be a person who is interested by paranormal powers, and then he gets lost and is tempted by them and so on. But in the tantric tradition of Kashmir Shaivism and so on, is simply the radiance of the heart. It's about somebody who realized that essence and then radiates that spirit, that creative power of the heart manifests. And this power of manifesting is exactly the power of radiance of Shambhala. No? So just briefly, this siddhis, anima, to become small as an atom, but actually in a subtle level or in a spiritual way, we can understand that as an absolute smallness or subtlety, the supreme subtlety of Atman. Mahima, greatness, and the omnipresence of Atman or Brahman. Garima, heaviness, and at the same time, the immutable background of supreme consciousness. Lagima, lightness, and at the same time, the absolute lightness or psychological transparency of the witness consciousness, that absolute transparency. Prapti, the capacity of touching everything, so extending everything, in infinite extension of the self. Then prakamiya, the capacity of materializing everything, this creative power with no limits that the self, God, is having. Ishitva, the capacity to possess absolute lordship. So absolute lordship of Atman, of the Supreme Self. And Vashitva, the power of mastering or gaining control over life and death. So the eternal reality of Atman. And we see here even how they correspond, or in the middle of this, again, heart chakra, we have the essence. And then it's interesting to see how these paranormal powers, anima, to be small as an atom, which is the infinite subtlety, is still connected with humility, humbleness. And then Mahima, it's this greatness. The Vashitva, which is absolute power and influence, still is based on love. And the lordship, you are the Lord of all creation, as God, as the spiritual heart. But this is rooted or as a psychological tendency or direction would be responsibility, and so on. So we see this. The 8th chakra appears in Jainism as well. It is relevant there. It's Sita chakra in Jainism. And you see, this is a Jain representation of the of it. And also, I mentioned about Kamalatmika. This is, you know, the 2 rows of 8 lotuses, this beauty and abundance and grace. The Dharma wheel in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, which is the very symbol of Buddhism, is again about 8 directions, or this 8-fold tendency. Then it's also this stellar octagon. It's like a star with 8 directions, can be seen in Christianity as a, and again we have the 8 petals in Christianity and in Islam as well. In Palermo, Capella Palatina, and in Islam in Spain, Al-Andalus, we find these motifs, these patterns, which are symbolic ways of pointing to the Puriyashtaka and to that limiting or expanding. Here is the key. When it's just about all these limiting aspects, we just remain limited. But then when we transform them as windows, is ways in which the consciousness can expand, and how Shambhala can purify by itself, can, having the seal of Shambhala there, all that transforms. So your body becomes Shambhala. Then we can understand better such statement. If you can use your body properly, then the body becomes Shambhala. The 96 principalities, so you remember, we mentioned that there are those 8 petals with 12, they said there are 12 kingdoms in each petals. The 96 principalities concur in all their actions, and you conquer the kingdom itself. They refer to the nadis and all other energy channels or ways in which consciousness manifests in our entire being, which is like such a realm. Now, the second part of this satsang is about a very beautiful, one of the most inspiring stories which I read about Shambhala. It's about Tara, the goddess Tara. There are in the Tibetan tradition 21 representation or expressions of Tara, the goddess of compassion. Tara is the light, the guiding star in this world of samsara, the one which can help us to go to nirvana, to cross this ocean of samsara. There are mainly 2 expressions of Tara, green Tara and white Tara. They are complementary. Sometimes white Tara is associated with the day, the green Tara with the night, so that compassion is manifesting both day and night. White Tara with motherhood and compassion, both are with compassion. And there are different manifestations of, or representations, sorry, of Tara, white Tara. She has, as you see, eyes in the forehead and in the feet and hands. And he's holding a lotus and making a mudra, gesture of giving, radiating compassion to human being. Other expressions of Tara. So I'm going now to read this. This comes from the book of Thomas Andrew, Shambhala, the Oasis of Light. It's about the tears of Tara. At least this is how I name this passage. It's still just as a parenthesis, when you read about Shambhala, Shangri-La, about many, we should still make a difference between imagination and what people would come with nice, novels or stories, and confessions based on genuine experiences and which are in tune with the classical Kala Chakra tradition. So this book is not a book of, a romantic story or imagination. The confirmation of this book authenticity is the fact that, for example, in the end of it is a brief compilation of written and oral Kala Chakra teachings about Shambhala, named The Land of Shambhala and Its Rulers, which was composed especially for this book. So it was something that was like a guarantee that this book is meant to be shared for the Western world, and was composed by Kantu Tondup, Secretary of the Council of Religious and Cultural Affairs of His Holiness Dalai Lama. So, and the message that appears in this part is very much in tune with that article written by this revered Tibetan Lama. Thomas Andrew lived for many years in China and Tibet. He actually was born in Russia, and so he lived. The book itself appeared in 1970, so everything happened. He lived in Tibet before the Chinese invasion, and after that lived after that as well. And he speaks about being guided to a very remote monastery, somewhere between Sikkim and Lhasa, in a very remote monastery, where he arrived after a long journey. After the brilliant sunshine, amplified by the whiteness of snow, I could hardly see anything inside the dark temple. So he entered and he was invited in the temple. Gradually, I became accustomed to the dimness, and I discerned two monks before a Buddha. The tall Pandit Lama saluted me with folded hands. "What brings you to the abode of snow and our poor temple, sir?" he said in fluent English. "Well, first of all, it is one of the most beautiful parts of the world. And secondly, I have been looking for a Lama who could enlighten me on the deeper truths of Tibetan Dharma," I said. The Lama silently scrutinized me with his inquisitive eyes. "What makes you think I am a learned Lama?" "I was told that you had received degrees in Lhasa and were familiar with Tibetan yoga, besides having had an English education in Sikkim." "Rumors about a man can be false," the Lama retorted. "That is true, but there is something intangible which can make corrections. It is intuition," I timidly remarked. My answer seemed to have satisfied the Tibetan monk, and with the ice being broken and communication established, he asked in a kind tone, "What is it that you want to know about our Buddhism?" "I have always believed that the great arhats, bodhisattvas, the saviors of mankind, otherwise called Mahatmas in India, are real persons. But do you have any knowledge about their actual abode?" I inquired. Buddhism is based on the belief in superior men who, following the Eightfold Path, have reached nirvana. We also cherish a teaching that somewhere in the north there exists a realm where some of these great souls abide. We call it Shambhala, responded the Lama. Do the illuminated souls from an invisible fraternity dedicated to the spiritual upliftment of mankind? We do have such a brotherhood in Tibet, but there is no reason to think that it is confined only to Asia, the Lama answered. The teaching of Lord Buddha, I suppose, the training and tests for admission into that brotherhood must take many years and are very difficult. I realize my unpreparedness and know that many lives may be needed for me to come up to your high standards. But what I have always aspired to, can I, in my own small way, be of service to your arhats, bodhisattvas, and take a part in your work of enlightening mankind? The path of service is difficult, requiring a great deal of self-sacrifice. But through the complete negation of the self, of the ego, one rises above the earth and is absorbed in infinity. If you wish, we will perform a yogic psychological exercise so that you can understand our plan of thought, the Lama suggested. Oh, I would be intensely interested, was my response. And now an exercise comes, which briefly I also recommend to do it together. It's like a preparation. It's very much, the elements are very much exercised in Kala Chakra, for example, tradition. So the Lama instructed me to assume the yogi posture in front of the Buddha and meditate as he sat next to me. Imagine that you are holding your vices in your right hand and your virtues in the left. So imagine that you are holding your vices in your right hand and your virtues in the left. Try to acknowledge equally both of them. Now put your invisible sins on the stone floor and move apart your virtues in the same way. So drop your limiting aspects, your virtues. Your face is covered with a mask, your personality, which comprises your age, sex, nationality, profession, and so on. Some masks are ugly and made of clay, others are of marble and are beautiful. Some are golden and others made of iron. But whatever your mask is, temporarily put it down on the floor in front of you, directed the Lama. A feeling of emptiness and lack of orientation suddenly appeared, as I lost my name, age, sex, nationality, profession. In fact, all of my personal characteristics. I almost heard my mask go down with a thud on the ground. You are now mentally and spiritually naked. Merely a center of awareness, possessing nothing. You are now only a flame in an ocean of fire. Spiritually, we are far beyond the confines of earth and are blending our fires with those of distant stars in the great void. Strange, exhilarating expansion of consciousness overshadowed me in a natural, effortless way. The mental influence of the Lama must have helped to make everything so vivid. We are ascending to the plane of no time, where everything exists now. Where there is no past, present, or future. All of a sudden, I felt a complete blank, as if time had stopped forever. It was a sensation of a total unity with a limitless, timeless universe. We are now descending from our lofty plane, lower, lower. Pick up your old mask. Take those virtues and vices on the floor. Return to your shell wherein you will dwell until your final liberation. Is this what you call nirvana? I asked after a few minutes of utter silence. You have had a glimpse of the great void and heard an echo of the great silence. Now you can understand our consciousness, which makes us feel sometimes as if we are only visitors on planet Earth. I wish I could assist your great work in some way, I said. If you have the desire to work for the bodhisattvas, that is priceworthy, but I shall have to explain our tasks, after which you may change your mind, cautioned the Lama. And then Tori describes how he asked two young lamas to come and to move a heavy bookcase, and then as they move it, a sign uncovering a hatch with a ring in the stone floor, so they opened the hatch. When it was open, a long stone stair was visible. The chief lama took a large burning candle and motioned to me to descend. After a few steps, I realized that the stair was leading down into a high cave with stalactites and stalagmites, which reminded me of a medieval chapel with alcoves and a long window through which daylight poured. Actually, this was not a window, but a crack on the south side of the rocky chamber, which was enlarged to let in more light. Although the cave was generally dry, drops of water dripped from stalactites into grotesque miniature rivulets, ultimately disappearing in the cracks underground. The folds of the cavern created the impression of nooks, niches, in a church. In the largest niche, on the north side, stood a large bronze statue. The pandit lit a row of red candles and joss sticks in front of it. Immediately, Tara, the goddess, emerged in all her splendor. She had a tiara, a diadem, large earrings, necklace, an eye on her forehead, and eyes on the palms of her hands and the soles of her feet to symbolize her omnipresence. Tara is the Madonna of Tibet, Nepal, and most of Asia, where she is also known as Kuan Yin, the goddess of compassion. Her right hand was outstretched as a sign of compassion and help. The left thumb and third finger were joined in a gesture of stressing the points of the good doctrine in its sublime logic. As the stone slab was inserted into the arch in the doorway behind us, the thought came to my mind that I was in another world, completely cut off from the one I had known. The Lama teacher brought me closer to the goddess. Before her, I noticed a cavity in the ground carved in the rock by the dripping water from the stalactites in the course of thousands of years. The oval reservoir was filled to the brim, and excess water was overwhelming from it. Drops from the ceiling of the cave set concentric ripples on the surface of the pool, which was as still as a mirror. These are the tears of Tara, lamenting the fall of man from his divine situation, from his divine station, pondered the Lama. Have you heard of the Lama Lamtso lake in Tibet, in which visions are seen when Lamaist officials search for the place of birth of the future Dalai Lama? Continued the Tibetan. I remember reading something about it. You have here an image of Lama Lamtso lake in a quite arid area. Here, especially the monks of Gelugpa group, there from where Dalai Lama is, go to look for visions. And any visitor, if a requirement would be to fast for 3 days and keep mauna, silence, for 3 days, and then with a proper state of mind, and if the karma allows, such visions may appear. It's this beautiful color of the lake, and then this ring of gray mountains and the elevation and the surrounding peaks combine to give it a highly changeable climate, and the continued passage of clouds and the wind creates a constant moving pattern on the surface of the waters. And on this surface, visions appear. But these moving waters are what they name the secondary causes. The main cause is your heart, is that consciousness which is just reflected on this medium there. On this lake, the visions about this 14th Dalai Lama appeared in 1935. The regent, Reting Rinpoche, received a clear vision of 3 Tibetan letters, a monastery, and then near the monastery, a house with turquoise roof tiles and so on. And then after, I think, 2 years of research, they found that place, and they found this boy, which is the actual Dalai Lama. This lake is protected by a deity, a guardian, Palden Lamo, which made a promise that she will allow this or guarantee the lineage of the Dalai Lamas, made this promise vow to the first Dalai Lama in a vision like this. So this is Palden Lamo, the guardian of this lake, this goddess. So we come back. This pool is similar to the sacred lake, and in it, pictures of great significance can also be seen. With curiosity, I looked into the water, reflecting the light of the candles, the figure of Tara in the dark alcove. But besides the refracted images, I saw nothing. Look deeper, still deeper. Om Mani Padme Hum, intoned the Lama, and the incantation reverberated through the grotto. The burning candles illuminated Tara with a kaleidoscopic array of colors. The smoke from the joss sticks rose high, and all this was reflected in the pool as if in a mirror, now and then disturbed by the dripping water. However, soon all the reflections vanished, and a layer of mist covered the water in the pool. Unexpectedly, I began to see pictures in it with utmost clarity, as if I were watching the screen of a colored television set. The Lama stood nearby and also looked into the water. The first scene was our planet in space, with its great oceans, continents, and masses of cloud formations. In a minute or two, the appearance of the globe began to change radically. Heavy gray, black, brown, and red clouds covered the more populated parts of the earth. Occasionally, this mass was pierced by fiery red flashes, as if from explosions. At times, light blue, rose, or golden rays and stars arose from the dark background to brighten it. But the whole planet was swamped by an enormous aura of dark, ugly colors. You are observing the mental and emotional vibrations emitted by mankind, and, as you can see, their quality is low. Look at that gray fog of selfishness. The blue sparks are spiritual aspirations of the minority, obscured by the mass thoughts of passion, hatred, and greed, which have formed this gigantic aura around the planet in the course of thousands of years. It is just like the ionized layers around the earth which reflect radio waves, explained the Lama. It was a startling disclosure to see with my own eyes the extensive mental shell surrounding the earth. Our planet is sick due to the man's wrong thinking, I whispered. At times, the dark clouds protruded far out into space, reminding me of the tentacles of an octopus. This dark octopus flying in interplanetary space was not a beautiful sight to behold, and the sensation that I lived on its back made me shudder. At that moment, brilliant rays of blue, rose, and snow white flashed like lightning through the dark conglomeration. Are they positive mental emissions of groups of people? I inquired of my instructor. They are, and you can see how the dark aura of the earth can be cleansed by them if man could only try to broadcast thoughts and emotions of that wavelength. This is what people should do systematically and by synchronization, so that the whole planet would emit fine spiritual vibrations, the Lama commented. Tara has cried long enough. Mother Nature may one day decide to shade off those short-sighted minds which have created this horrible shell around the earth. Mankind must purify and disinfect its planetary home. The Arhats, the Bodhisattvas, are doing all they can to neutralize the evil, but it is more important to stop the constantly created new negative emissions, and only men can do that, mused the Tibetan Lama, as I was watching the pool before Tara and the images that became visible in so strange a manner. Gradually, they began to fade, and soon there was nothing but the surface of the pool with the intermittent drops falling from above. Needless to say, I am dumbfounded, but I am more than ever willing to help, even though it is a job fit only for titans, and I am not one, I remarked with a feeling of despair. It is good that you have the determination to assist the bodhisattvas. Everyone can help according to his or her ability. What can I do? I asked. The Lama was silent for a few minutes. He closed his eyes, either thinking of the advice he could give me or else receiving an inaudible message from one of the exalted beings who fill the Tibetan pantheon. We will continue a little bit still. Now, he is going to say a legend. I'll make it very short. I must tell you a legend which is as old as the Himalayas. Even though you may be a little cold in this cave, I want to relate this tale before the face of our goddess Tara, for very soon we are entering her epoch. And the Lama began his story. The oral teachings of the Tashi Lampo monastery, this is the place of Panchen Lama, the one who is in touch with Shambhala, asserts that millions of years ago a number of superhuman beings from another highly advanced world came to Earth for the acceleration of the evolution of this planet and its future mankind. They had mind-born bodies, so subtle bodies, that is created artificially, which, or from this subtle world, which could be made as heavy as the core of the earth or light and fiery as sunlight. And then he speaks that they were, between them, there was also Mara, the Lucifer, like that demon which Buddha confronted. And then there were also the bodhisattvas, and Mara was responsible to create the concrete mind, the individuality, the ego. But then when later on the bodhisattvas and taras came to foster the heart of human being, he refused to step aside. And then from then on, the bodhisattvas have had a double task. On the one hand, of combating Mara's attempt to chain man to the earth and make him selfish, unscrupulous, and warlike, and on the other, of working for the spiritual advancement of mankind ordained by the law of cycles, spiritual cycles. And then mankind must now decide on which side it is, on the side of light or of darkness, and then reap its karma. All the peoples must now choose between the old ways of strife or a new harmony of world brotherhood. The exalted beings would say to Mara and to all these limiting forces, break down the world around the earth, for in that shell humanity is spiritually suffocating. The cosmic clock shows that soon the time will come for the age of spirit. You could not stop it if you wanted. For the Yan Chohans, the devas, the deities are soon bringing a body from space which is as yet invisible, a mere vortex of forces, but when it flares up, its flames will burn all your works or all those limiting works of the limiting forces. Century after century, millennium after millennium, we have contacted mankind with messages suited for particular people. All of them stressed unity and universal brotherhood. Unfortunately, very few have succeeded in awakening mankind, hence the necessity to issue a final warning in these critical times. This is our planetary ultimatum, and mankind will have to accept the commandment of the heart, or else it will destroy itself. And it says that otherwise man will be judged and punished by nature. This message should be delivered with kindness and compassion, yet very firmly, because it is a warning, and warnings are brought only by well-wishers. Man will then have to make his supreme choice, light or darkness, peace or war, heart or fist, wisdom or ignorance. Can you understand now that mankind is a battlefield of cosmic celestial forces? This is, of course, a very ancient teaching incorporated in all religions. What should be done then? I asked. An appeal must be made to disseminate the doctrine of the heart, for this alone can save the planet, the Lama responded. Only a few would listen, I interrupted. That does not matter. Our planetary ultimatum has to reach all men on earth. At this crossing of the roads, humanity has to choose between a path going down into the pit of moral decay or one that is ascending to the stars. This is the time of a terrestrial emergency. If the warning is ignored and the masses continue to tread the present path, siding with the Prince of Darkness, then the cosmic hierarchy will take the challenge, and the radiant ruler of Shambhala will destroy all evil on this planet. Do you expect me to present these legends and prophecies to the public at large and still be considered sane? I asked. In this century, the nations of the world have fought 2 world wars and might fight another one. Are they sane? You will have to do it, and there will be other voices, for so much is at stake. The destiny not only of mankind, which can be replaced in a few million years, but that of a planet, which took a manvatara to build and grow, replied the Tibetan. It's in the Hindu cosmology, is a huge cycle of 306 billions years and so on. So, again, you ask, what would you expect mankind to do? I inquired. The teachings of Tara, the doctrine of the heart, must form the foundation of a new sociology. There could be debates between systems, but without war. We must realize that we are all members of one great planetary family, the teacher said with great warmth. Can we solve our problems without the apocalyptic upheavals which you mentioned? I asked. We can, and we should, but shall we? Will the majority abandon the ways of greed, selfishness, narrow nationalism, and the worship of the sensual at the expense of the spiritual? People do not have to become monks and nuns, but they can certainly live and think like real human beings. Why do they have to be killers of their brothers and destroyers of Mother Nature? Karma, cosmic justice, is terrible in its action. Why challenge it? Is this ultimatum connected with the epoch of Shambhala, which is spoken of in your ancient writings? I inquired. It is the opening of the gates to a better era, the cycle of Tara. Take her sign, that of the heart, and let it unite all mankind, for every good religion and ideology is based on humanism, said the Lama, taking me closer to the statue of Tara, illuminated by the light of the candles. Without warning, he placed my left hand on her right hand, outstretched in a gesture of compassion to all mankind. The sign of the heart is the mark of the next epoch, that of Maitreya. That is what Kalachakra, the science of cycle, says, declared the Lama. When I removed my hand, I made the amazing discovery that a mark of the heart was clearly showing on my palm of my left hand. This was not an imprint of the enameled, the imprint symbol from Tara's hand, which was an eye, but some phenomenon connected with the blood circulation, because every time I touched the heart-shaped spot, it became pallor. The Lama seemed to be very pleased with what had happened. That is good. You have the sign of Tara. Even though it will vanish in a few days, let it remain invisibly forever on your hand, he said. I was so shaken that I could not utter a word. I ponder upon the great knowledge given to me in the shrine of Tara. So this is a part of the experience and that confession about how the planet is looking, and it's maybe obvious for some of us who have even a little bit of intuition that all these heavy clouds of negative thinking and selfishness is like a burden for this planet Earth, for Mother Earth, and all this physical threatening of the Earth is just the consequence of this. Exactly as we put the seal of the heart of the Shambhala, when it was that book of Shambhala written, by Simon and me a few years ago, that mark was not by chance. It was intentional to put the mark of Shambhala on the planet Earth, to have this like a seal, to visualize this light on planet Earth. From now on, in our morning meditations, when we send compassion, blessing, compassion, love to the country in France or in Mexico or wherever we have our place, and then before sending to the cosmos, let's send to Mother Earth as well. To send the blessing and love and compassion to Mother Earth. And if you feel like also that seal of Shambhala Yantra on the planet, like a purification and the sanctity of it. also for me was very amazing, because I read and I was impressed at that time, but I forgot the message, that message in which he said, this is the era of, or the message of the heart. Years passed. We started Hridaya Yoga. This is what I name, Pratyabhijna, recognition. So when this Hridaya Yoga was created, the yoga of the spiritual heart, I didn't think about this message, that is the message of the heart, and the humanity should embrace the heart. But it was and this was actually the main reason for which we started. I felt that it's important to start again sharing about Shambhala. When I was in Romania in a retreat last year, it was again a vision of Shambhala, and there were beings with light pointing to a space which was the heart, but a heart like a universal heart, and saying, here there is the yoga of the heart. You have like a spiritual path, the path of the heart, which is the core of existence. It's the yoga of that essence. The yoga is like, to put it in like a profane way, it's like you have the copyright of the heart. And I didn't think in this way till that moment. And then it was this, and then I read again this, in which she says it's the message of the heart which needs to be transmitted to humanity. So we can name this science or ways of allowing ourselves being more inspired, and allow the Shambhala imprint and ideals and this archetypal longing for compassion and brotherhood and sisterhood and love purify our vision, our way of seeing the world and seeing ourselves. Let's conclude this with just a short moment of meditation with Shambhala, just very short. Evocation of Shambhala by meditating on Shambhala Yantra. We bring the awareness in the heart, the purity of our aspiration, a longing to support in helping a better world of compassion and care and honesty and humbleness and joy. We focus on Shambhala Yantra. Gently close the eyes. Qualities and passion. With this, we conclude our satsang, blessings, inspiration.